This is the Millennials in Multifamily podcast, brought to you by Kronos Investment Partners. We interview industry experts to unlock key information that will help young professionals break into the multifamily world in order to create long-term and short-term wealth. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to iTunes and leave a rating and written review so we can reach more listeners.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Millennials in Multifamily podcast. I'm your host, John Stober, with my co-host, Fritz Ritter. Today, our guest is Kevin Gardner. After spending almost 20 years and becoming the Vice President of Sales and Marketing in Comcast Midwest Division, Kevin founded Multifamily Utility Solutions, where he fulfills the needs of property owners and third-party vendors to help them better understand the cable operator's perspective, maximize their business opportunities, and to deliver incremental revenue to apartment building owners. Kevin Gardner, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Millennials in Multifamily podcast. You operate in a very unique space in the multifamily industry, negotiating cable and telecommunications contracts on behalf of property owners. Could you just give our listeners a little bit more of a background on exactly what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, John and Fritz. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's good to connect with you guys again. And a lot of people, a lot of owners, especially new owners, aren't aware of the opportunity they have with cable and internet contracts. And that's where the biggest opportunity really is in utilities, is with the cable and the internet access rights. So what we do is just educate people on the opportunity that's there and then follow up on their behalf and make money for them.
So could you dive in a little bit? How exactly do you make money for these building owners?
Yeah. So, all right. So this is a little bit longer explanation, but we'll go through all the details. So when a cable company gets what's called a non-exclusive franchise to operate, that means the municipality, whether it's Baltimore or Cleveland or whatever, gives them the right to be in the public easements and operate a cable system. Okay? Now, it doesn't give them the right to be on anybody's personal property. But in my situation as a homeowner, my cable company is on the public easements, and as a homeowner, when I sign up for their service, I'm giving them the right to be on my private property. Mm-hmm. In the multifamily world, it's a little bit different, because if I'm renting a unit at your property, John, that's not my personal property. So if I want to become a customer of Spectrum or Comcast or whoever it is, I don't have the right to let them on your property. You do. So in that situation, they need from you a grant of easement, a right of entry agreement, something that allows them to be on your property to provide service to me.
So then where does it come in? How, as a building owner, do we start making additional money from this?
Okay, so those rights are valuable, right? Let's say you've got 100 units, and that's 100 prospective customers. Mm-hmm. And if you don't give me the right to be, as the cable company, to be on your property to serve those customers, I don't get a chance to make any money from them. And you could say, they just have the right to have dishes, or they could go with another provider or whatever. Because in most cases, there's both the phone company and the cable company. And in some cases, there's multiple cable companies. Because remember, one of the key words that I used was non-exclusive franchise. So cable companies get a bad rap, and maybe this goes back to the days when I worked for Comcast and got a chip on my shoulder for this. But everybody's like, you're a monopoly, you're a monopoly. And the fact of the matter is, cable companies are not monopolies. They are not monopolies. They are given a non-exclusive franchise, which means the city can grant another franchise to another provider at any time. Mm-hmm. The problem is that as a cable operator, it's expensive to wire a city and invest in that marketplace. And so if I'm looking at an opportunity to spend my capital dollars am I going to want to go where there's already another competitor, or am I going to want to go where I'm maybe the only opportunity and increase my service and add things like Spectrum and Comcast have done with mobile phone service and things like that? Am I going to get a better return on my investment there? Or if I'm Comcast, do I want to go in and compete for customers with Spectrum, for example? It doesn't make sense. So it's not that I'm a monopoly. It's just that the cost barrier to get into the market is so great that it's not a good business decision for most other possible providers.
Mm-hmm.
So what size building does this typically serve? Like, is there a minimum unit count you should look for with this?
Yeah, you know what? A couple of things there. It depends on the cable provider. So some of them are more willing to negotiate with smaller units than others. And in those, there are some cases where either AT&T Fiber or Google Fiber's in there, or another competitor like WOW, and there's another provider. In those cases, you can typically go with a little bit smaller unit count, but the rule of thumb is 100. 100 seems to be just that magic number for a couple of reasons. One is it's significant enough that it gets their attention, but also because Comcast or Spectrum, they like to assign a representative to work with the leasing office. And when you've got 100 units, you've got a leasing office. So you're getting those people in and you're sitting down with them. Whereas if you've got less than 100 units, sometimes you don't. So the leasing office, they like to be able to have a representative work with them so that they can go ahead and encourage them to get their service. And that's one of the ways that you can make money as well.
So if we negotiate a deal with, let's say, Comcast on my 100-unit building, does that mean the residents are only allowed to get their cable from Comcast, or are they still allowed to get service from a company like Spectrum?
Well, it depends on what rights you negotiate. So there's different kinds of rights, but typically Spectrum and Comcast are not in the same marketplace because they're two of the biggest ones, and they've kind of over the years they've kind of got their own territories. Just kind of like AT&T is not usually in the same area as CenturyLink or Frontier or something like that. But there's other companies like WOW or but to answer your question, no, you don't have to be. They don't have to only get that service from them. So there's a couple of different rights that you can negotiate. Mm-hmm. One is exclusive use of the wiring, that you own the wiring inside your buildings. Now, everything from the cable, the telephone poles to the building is owned by the cable company. But once it hits your building, you own that inside there. So you could give the exclusive right to use those wires to a provider, or you can simply give the exclusive marketing rights, which is something that's coveted, right? So what that means is that when somebody new moves into your property, you only promote Comcast. So even if there's another provider, you don't promote them. So that's an exclusive right that you can give. Or there's non-exclusive rights. You can give the non-exclusive marketing rights, or you can give the exclusive use to use the wiring, and that's where we have to step in. And so people, I hope you're not looking for the answer to this question, because I can tell you I don't know, because a lot of times people say, okay, I've got a 100-unit building and it's in pick a city, and so what can I get for that? And the answer is I don't know. I don't know. Until we do our research, we don't know. It depends on who else is in the market. It depends on, is there any agreement in place already? It depends on, a lot of variables, and we have to do that due diligence before I would be negligent if I gave you an answer to that question without doing my homework. Just like, you wouldn't say, hey, there's a 100-unit complex. How much is it going to cost me? There's a lot of variables.
Mm-hmm. And so let's say we gave Comcast the rights to use our wiring in our building,
Mhm.
would that mean as the landlord, we're kind of paying for the expense and then passing it on to the tenants and getting a kickback from Comcast? Or is it just like an additional revenue and then the tenants are still paying for their own internet?
Yeah, there are actually two different types of agreements. One is what's called a right of entry. And in that case, you are giving the cable provider or internet provider, phone company, whoever it is, you're giving them the right to enter your property, to be on your property. In that case, they are billing the customer directly and you are not involved. You're not paying for anything.
Mm-hmm.
In that situation, what you typically will get in the form of compensation is what's called a door fee or a signing bonus. And that's just a one-time lump sum payment in exchange for signing that agreement. Or you could get what's called revenue share, which is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's a commission. It's a percentage of the revenue that they generate from your property. And in that case, you want to have exclusive marketing rights because you want to do everything possible to try and help them generate as much revenue as possible because you're getting a share of it.
Right.
And it's typically a sliding scale. So, and the sliding scale is based on what percentage of the customers they have. So if you've got 50% of the customers, you might get twice the percentage as you would with only 20% of the customers.
So meaning if I had 50% of my building using the cable provider, I would get 10% of revenue, as opposed to if I had 25% of the building going to the cable provider, I would only get 5% of the revenue.
Not those exact numbers, but that exact concept, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you typically see a price difference with exclusive and non-exclusive for the revenue share? Like, would you get a higher compensation for exclusive?
Well, if you're doing revenue share, you want to give exclusivity because the everything, and you also at that point want to be, hey, no dishes here. We don't allow dishes and things like that because you want to encourage, those people to go ahead and get service from the provider that's paying you, right? Let's say you got AT&T in there and Comcast in there and you're getting money from Comcast, but you're not from AT&T. Well, you want to, do everything you can to encourage people to take Comcast service because it's in your best interest as well. So that's how the right of entry agreements work. Now, there is something else called bulk build services. And in a bulk build situation, you, as the owner of the 100-unit building, would buy cable and or internet service from the provider like Comcast in a bulk build in situation. So, and just because the numbers are easy, I'm just going to use 100, and then I'm going to say you buy cable and internet from the provider for $50. So you pay, $5,000 a month. So you've got a fixed cost now of $5,000 a month, but that is another amenity that you can offer. And you can either offer it as an amenities rider to the agreement, to the lease, or you can increase your rent because there's a significant value to having those services as an amenity, right? I mean, if I'm looking at, I can move into your property over here and pay $550 and get my cable service with it, or I can, go and I'm going to pay for cable and internet anyhow, or I can, take this other property and pay a lesser amount, that might be enough to sway me if that's an important thing to me. What they will tell you, and this is true in some cases, is that you can charge. So let's say you're paying $50 for it. You can do an amenities rider for, let's say, $75 because the retail value of that product is $100. And therefore you can then make $25 extra off every unit. So it's another way to make more money. The catch is you pay for every unit every month, regardless of whether it's occupied, regardless of whether or not that resident pays you any extra, regardless of whether or not they use it. So it really comes down to a case-by-case situation, and each market is different, each property is different. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you one's better than the other until I find out more about that 100-unit property that you have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but there's there's lots of different ways to make money, you know, in this area.
So how long are these contracts typically for? I mean, it sounds like each one's unique, but
yeah, the rule of thumb is it's 10 years for right of entry. For bulk build, it's typically less, so like 5 years for bulk build. So that's kind of the normal terms that we see. Now, one caveat here is that the cable companies prefer bulk build. Most cable companies prefer bulk build to right of entry, because even though they're paying or they're getting less money, they're giving you a discount, they're getting it on 100% of the units. So even if they're giving you a 50% discount when they might have got 50% of the units before, now they're getting 100% of it. So the revenue that they're generating from there is about the same as it would have been. Plus, they aren't rolling trucks out to connect and disconnect people, because they connect it, leave it all connected. So their operational expenses are less. Plus, you as a property owner is probably not going to default into a non-pay situation or collection situation like an individual resident, right, might.
Mm-hmm.
So they prefer that environment. And as a result, if you enter into an agreement that is a right of entry, and then you go back to them later, let's say it's a 10-year agreement, you go back to them 4 years from now and say, you know what, I'd rather not do the right of entry anymore, I want to go bulk, they'll be like, great, you know, let's work something out. But if you go with a bulk build agreement, and 2 years into a 5-year term, you're like, man, this thing is just not working out for us, they're going to be like, well, sorry about that, man. You signed the agreement, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, just something to think about. So I always, if people are on the fence, I always tell them that, you know, in most situations, it's easier to go from right of entry to bulk than it is from bulk to right of entry.
So Kevin, it kind of seems like as the property owner, though, you have all the leverage. Like, I don't even have to necessarily let the cable company on my property. So how feasible is it to negotiate really favorable terms against the cable company?
Well, you don't, but at the same time, let's say I'm looking at properties, right? I'm looking at apartments,
mm-hmm.
and I'm going to expect to have access to the larger cable providers in the country, right? So if I come to look at your property and you're like, yeah, we've got like AT&T DSL, but we don't offer Comcast, even though Comcast is offered in the rest of the city, and the apartment complex next to you has it, you're kind of at a competitive disadvantage. So you don't have all the leverage, in my opinion. You know, it kind of really is a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of how I see it, and how they see it. Because look, we're giving you money because you're going to help us grow our business, or you're going to buy service from us. And likewise, you're saying, look, we're going to give you favorable terms, but we still want you on the property.
Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like there are a ton of variables that go into this.
Yeah.
As you start to hone in on a certain market or the city, are you able to start seeing trends, or is it going to be completely different from property to property, even in the same neighborhood?
Within certain regions, if it's the same cable provider, yeah, you're going to see certain trends. But even cable companies like Comcast Tennessee versus Comcast Virginia
mm-hmm.
have different approaches to the business. So it really kind of depends on each market. And they've got some overarching philosophies as a company, and some guidelines, but even within those guidelines, it can vary from region to region, and certainly from company to company. There's a lot of variations.
Okay, so I'm like a big numbers geek, very analytical. I do a lot of spreadsheet analysis. So I'm wondering, how do I incorporate this into my underwriting, especially if I'm going into a new market? And how long is this whole process?
So we can do estimates if you give us more specifics. So if you came to me and said, Kevin, I have a 120 unit property in Nashville, Tennessee. Here's the address. Can you give me an estimate? I'll give you a conservative estimate of what I think we can do. But until we know, is there a contract already in place? Because the contract goes with the property, not with the owner. So, and I hate to say this, and I'm not, but even in due diligence, sometimes I've seen where there's a cable contract that didn't show up. And I don't think it's any wrongdoing or intent to deceive on anybody's part at all. It's just that if you think about the life cycle of a property, right? Some of these properties are 20 and 30 years old. They've been sold numerous times. They've changed names numerous times. The office has moved. These documents didn't used to be recorded. Cable companies have switched from one to another, right? I mean, just recently, Time Warner is no longer Time Warner. They're now Spectrum, right? So through all these changes, I've seen it where in due diligence, there is a contract that didn't show up. So I always caveat everything with, until we check with the cable provider, we don't know for sure whether there's an agreement. So that's another reason to be cautious. I've seen it happen too many times.
So is there a way to negotiate these contracts that may be in place? If it's for 10 years and year 5, you want to switch, how do you go about doing that? Or if you want better terms?
If you want better terms, you're not gonna. I mean, honestly,
pound sand.
yeah. I mean, and the reason they do that is think of how many properties these guys manage. If they were, and think of how often these things sell, right? If they were renegotiating with every new owner and everything, they'd need 4 times the staff and the overhead and all that kind of stuff. So it just goes with, there's an assignability clause. I've never seen a contract in all my years of doing this. I've never seen a contract that said it's only goes with the owner. And when the owner sells, they contracts null and void. So it just doesn't happen that way. It's just not feasible to track all that. Just like a lot of times the revenue share percentages are not negotiable because there's no way for them to track, okay, so I've got this property over here that's got this one and this property over here that's got this one. The door fees or the signing bonus sometimes is negotiable because it's one time, one and done. They don't have to track it because revenue share is typically paid on a quarterly basis. So, it's automated. It's like they've got, all right, run all the revenue share reports and just automate it, send out the checks and all that kind of stuff. And that makes it easier for them to do.
So I know in some like commercial tenant leases, they have an option to renew or negotiate. Do they not have anything like that in the contracts they put with these?
Yeah, there's typically an auto renew period that kicks in if you don't give notice. So we actually have a proprietary database that we had built for that purpose alone, right? So you may come to me and say, here's a 100-unit property, and we may come back and say, geez, Fritz, John, it's got 5 years left on it. And, there's nothing we can really do other than put it in our database, and we run a report at the beginning of every month that triggers us for people who need to give notice to make sure that auto renew period doesn't kick in. Right. And so, we've kind of touched on some of these things that people are like, well, can't I do this myself? Do I really need you to do it? And the answer is sure, you can. Just like if technically I could try and build my own website, I could change the oil in my car, I think, but I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm better off turning that over to somebody who does it all the time, paying them to do it, and doing what I do best, which is negotiate these deals. Because you've already seen there's so many variables. Who do you reach out to? We know all the contacts. We know what the terms are. We know all those things, and we know what's a fair deal. Because prior to starting this company, I used to be on the other side of the table. I oversaw the department at Comcast in one of the divisions that negotiated with property owners. Right, so we kind of understand both sides of the of the transaction, and we're in touch with that. For that matter, I guess I could do my own dental work if I could do YouTube or something like that. But I'm sorry, I don't encourage it. But I guess it's possible.
Are you struggling to understand how to underwrite multifamily properties? Hi, I'm John Stober, and I completely understand your problem. I thought underwriting would come naturally to me due to my background in finance and accounting, but I quickly found out that there aren't a lot of resources that cover this subject. I had no idea whether what I was doing was right, wrong, or just original. I don't want you to have to pick up little nuggets here and there like I did. So I wrote an ebook called How to Analyze Big Apartment Buildings and Make Them Feel Small that puts together all the pieces of the puzzle. We're also giving away a deal analyzer with the ebook, and they're both completely free. Don't wait as long as I did to start chasing financial freedom. Go to bit.ly/underwriting ebook and get your free copy today. So Kevin, if you have a 10-year cable contract though, let's say there's a 10-year cable contract on a building and I'm buying that building, as the new buyer, do I get any sort of compensation for that lump sum payment? It kind of seems like I'm getting the short end of the stick, especially if I don't like the provider.
You are getting the short end of the stick unless, and I have had some success in this, but it's only if you find that contract in the due diligence process and it's a 10-year agreement, and let's say the owner was paid $10,000 and there's 5 years left on it. As you're negotiating, before you sign the final papers, I would always go and say, look, we found this cable contract. It's a 10-year thing. We expect $5,000 because we're absorbing 5 years of the agreement. Mm-hmm. And typically, it's a hard argument for the seller to make that you're not entitled to any of it, right? Mm-hmm. Under what grounds would it make sense that you're not entitled to any of that? It wouldn't, right? So you can do that. The revenue share immediately, you have to give notice to the cable company, but the revenue share goes to you then. Mm-hmm. So you do get that revenue share. But at the same time, if it's a bulk build situation and you don't want bulk build, you're on the hook because you're paying for that.
So I wanted to go a little bit more into your estimate when you're on the front end and we're going into the underwriting. What all does your estimate include when you start researching an area and the companies that service it?
I'm going to look at who's there, and I'm going to tell you what I think we can get for a door fee and or revenue share, or what I think the numbers might look like on a bulk. So, most of it is just kind of what we think your P&L will look like when it comes to these line items after you take over, what you might be able to expect on a go-forward basis from revenue share. And, if revenue share is already in place and you're inheriting a contract, you should have all that. It should be in the numbers already. It should show up. And that's another way that might trigger you to say, oh, wait a minute, we're getting a payment from Comcast. So that must mean there's a contract in place. So, hey, where is that contract? Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, were you paid a lump sum when you signed that contract? And how long ago was it? Because typically if you're getting revenue share, you most likely had a lump sum payment as well. Those two usually go hand in hand.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Huh.
Usually, because here's the thing. So, long time when I was at Comcast, we only like to give up one-time door fees. Because of the way we accounted for it, we didn't account for it in such a way that it counted as an ongoing expense. It was a one-time intangible asset that didn't really hurt our P&L. And we were measured significantly on our P&L performance. Revenue share payments go against the P&L. So it's an expense. So we didn't want the expense, we only wanted the intangible asset. So that changed though, because cable companies got wise and said, well, wait a minute here. We're giving all this money up front. They've got no vested interest to help us grow our business.
Mm-hmm.
We need them to have a vested interest. And so they did the numbers and said, look, even if we incur this as an ongoing expense, there's more upside to have them involved in helping us gain customers than there is in the offset to the expense. So that's why those two things typically go hand in hand.
Have you seen any building owners get very creative with their marketing for the cable provider they're in a contract with?
John, I got to tell you, usually by that time, I'm out of the loop. I stay involved if there's any issues. Like I had an owner of a property in Tennessee say, hey man, we did the contract, with you a year or so ago, and I'm having trouble with some installations out on this property. And I jumped back in and said, yeah, let's see what we can do and remedy the situation, all that kind of stuff. But as far as like the day-to-day stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And that's another reason that the cable companies typically like 100 units or more, because they want a leasing agent, they want an office, they want to assign somebody to that property to help you grow your business. They might get involved in your pool party, right? You might have a pool party if you're, at the beginning of the year, and you might invite people out to be a part of that. And, you would invite your cable provider. And when we say exclusive marketing, it's important to understand that let's say you've got a phone company and a cable company both there, and you've got an exclusive marketing agreement with the cable company. Both can still provide service. The exclusive marketing simply means that you are held accountable for the things you can control.
Mm-hmm.
You can control what you hand out at the time of install, or at the time of the your resident is moving in. You can control who you allow to do door-to-door sales. You can control, who you invite to the pool party. You can't control direct mail pieces. You can't control the billboard across the street. You can't control those things. So if AT&T sends direct mail to your residence, that doesn't mean you're in violation of your exclusive marketing agreement with Comcast.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't control that. It's only those things that you can control. They're the things that you'll exclusively, promote one provider. And all you're saying is they're our preferred provider.
Okay.
You're never lying. You're never saying they're our only provider or anything like that. You're just saying, look, this company is our preferred provider.
So I know with like utilities, there's regulated versus unregulated markets where you can and you can't negotiate with them. Is that the same thing with cable?
No, we can do cable contracts anywhere, virtually anywhere. Although I'll tell you, we get into some really rural areas where it's a small cable company and they're the only game in town other than a dish. They're not, in some cases willing to give us anything. We've run into that situation. The regulated and deregulated really is more about the electric and gas. And we do get involved in that, although I'll tell you that 95% of our revenue comes from cable and internet contracts. The electric and gas is all based on usage, and it's based on what market, and are you in a deregulated market or not? Mm-hmm. So, for example, Maryland is a deregulated state, and in Maryland, there's multiple providers. Tennessee is a regulated state. There's only one provider. The rates are set by the state, and it is what it is. You pay this regulated rate, so there's no opportunity to, have companies compete for your business. Maryland, there's various providers, and you can go to one and ask for a proposal, and go to the other one and ask for a proposal. So that's really limited. I mean, honestly, because of that, it's really limited, and you have to have what I would call significant usage. And unless you pay for your residents' electric and gas, which most people don't, unless you have large common areas, workout facilities, pools, common area laundry rooms, and things like that, where you've got a lot of usage, you don't really have an opportunity for as much savings as you might think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's always worth looking into. I mean, you don't ask the question, you don't know. And we have a broker that will look into all that. We just get a bill from, the apartment owner and say, hey, look, is there an opportunity to save money here? And sometimes there is, and more times than not, it's not significant.
So then, as the person who's just negotiating the contracts, how are you paid in all of this?
We work on commission only.
Mm-hmm.
So we get paid a percentage of what we make for you. And we've done this, we've negotiated right up to the bitter end, right? And we haven't gotten a deal done, and we got nothing for it.
Mm-hmm.
Other than we believe in long-term relationships. We believe in doing the next right thing, and in time, we'll do business together. If we help you with this and it doesn't account for anything for us, that's okay. We helped you, and the next time you've got something you want us to look into, maybe that's the one that we make money on.
Mm-hmm.
So we believe strongly in win-win situations, right? So our best interest is tied to your best interest. The more money I get for you, the more money I make. If I don't make anything for you, why should you pay me anything?
Mm-hmm. So speaking of wins, could you tell us a story of what's the biggest win you've had on a cable contract negotiation?
I guess, we've had, we win all the time, John. Come on, man. We're always winning, man. We're always like, boom, boom,
the biggest
boom,
one.
next. I guess I would say that we had an owner come to us, and I think this was 2 years ago, with 74 units in a large metropolitan market. And we went to the cable provider and we said, look, what do you do for us here? And they came back and they said, we'll give you this. This is our best offer. And, quite frankly, it wasn't that. It was okay. It wasn't great. So we began networking in that community, in that metropolitan area. And we took the 74 units and we got enough other owners together, and they agreed to let us represent them. So that instead of 74 units for that owner, we put them in with 4 other owners, and we negotiated representing 1,600 units instead of 74. That owner waited a year, but their upfront payment quadrupled. Now they had to wait a year, and all that kind of stuff, but it's all about leverage in that situation. So plus it helped us. It was a lot longer process and all that kind of stuff, and everything like that. But that was a win. I would say that was a win. He thought it was a win.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
And we look for opportunities like that, right? So we try and bring owners together. And, when we go to a cable company and say, look, we've got 4 owners with, 1,000 units, it's more powerful than going and saying we've got 1 owner with 100 units, because now they like dealing with us because they know we know what we're talking about. And if there's any education that has to happen or explaining things to owners, they explain, they don't have to explain it to us. And if the owners want us on calls and things like that, we jump on calls with them and things, So it's more efficient for them to deal with one of us than 4 individual owners, because we've been in this business for so long. We know what it is, and they just have to tell us one thing and we get it. We understand. And we don't have to, they don't have to educate the owner. We do that for them.
I'm really glad you told that story, because especially for anyone listening, or myself included, if I didn't have a 100-unit building, I would have had no idea how to leverage this. And now, it just gets like the thoughts rolling.
Yeah. And it's got to be, we can't take, 4 here and 8 there. And, you got to have more, you got to have, I'd say at least 40, 50, and it's got to be packaged. But I couldn't take 5 40s and get much leverage out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I can take, a 40, 140 and a 240 and get more leverage out of that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah. So, just looking for opportunities, gaining leverage, and networking, man. That's what we do all the time is, we get a great opportunity to appear on podcasts like yours and explain what's going on. And, the more we can spread the word, the more, I mentioned that we've got a proprietary database. If you came to me and said, hey, I've got a property over here, I'm going to go to my database first and say, who else is in that market? Who's got what? What can we do?
Mm-hmm. Relationship business.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So are there any other strategies that you've heard of owners using where they could get into one of these cable contracts with a smaller building, like a 40 or 50 unit?
Mostly on those, you got to just partner up with somebody else or wait. Mm-hmm. So we had another owner who was just under the 100 mark, and this was 2 or 3 years ago in Louisville, Kentucky. And we got somewhat of an offer on it. It wasn't that great. And he came back and he's like, you know what? We're looking at 2 other properties there. Like, well, if you think you're serious about getting those other 2 properties, let's wait. Mm-hmm. Let's wait. So we went from just under 100. They closed on those 2 others, and they created leverage themselves because the timing was better for them to wait and buy these other 2 properties. And then we went back in and we got a better offer.
But even if they were under one portfolio, the properties themselves need to be at least around 50 units.
Yeah, ideally. I mean, if I've got a client that's got, 1,500 units, and, they've got everything from 300 units down to, 20, 30, a few 50s, and then some other hundreds. So when you've got 1,500 and you've got a couple of, 20s to 50s to throw in there, then it's more acceptable. Mm-hmm. But, unless you've got that larger portfolio, it's tough to get those done. And becoming less likely, I'll tell you that as well. I'm seeing a trend, and over the years, I've seen the trends go. It's a pendulum, right? It's just depends on how competitive is it. Oh, there's another cable company coming in. Oh man, Google's coming in. We got to sew everything up. We got to be more aggressive. And now things are settling down, and I'm seeing where cable companies are becoming a little bit. Well, we don't really want to deal with some of the smaller ones. Let's just focus on the hundreds and above. So it's getting harder and harder to make the case that they should do something with 50s and 40s and things like that. Mm-hmm.
Kevin, I had a question. How has streaming affected the cable contracts with like Netflix and Hulu being pretty big? Has that affected the sales?
Well, yes, and no, because here's the thing, right? So, cable internet continues to just grow. So when you look at your revenue share payment, you're probably making less from video than you used to, right? Video used to be the only thing, right? So when revenue share started, you were making more money off your video than you were internet. But now we're seeing video going down, but internet's going up. So now revenue shares kind of still remaining, steady, but you're making a greater percentage of it from your internet service than you are your video service. And there's other companies coming in, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I had a call earlier today with somebody who, or yesterday, or no, it was Monday, I guess. Man, it's Groundhog Day, isn't it? I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's like same day, different day. But we're talking to people that are trying to do like streaming services like Sling and Hulu and Netflix and C-Stream and things like that, and seeing, is there a way to kind of bring them into the equation as well? And so we're trying to constantly, stay on top of all these things that are going on, so that we can help the owners our job is to help the owners make the most informed, best decision that they can for their property. If they want a recommendation, we'll give it to them. But at the same time, our job is to gather information and be as knowledgeable as we can about all the different options that are available to them. Yeah,
I guess the reason I asked that is because when I really don't use cable that much, but it's included in Comcast now. So I just keep the Comcast because now Netflix is included.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, my provider is a smaller provider. It's not one of the big guys, Comcast or Spectrum. And all I have from them is internet, and I use Hulu.
That's all you need.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it works. It's a little not as easy to, flip back and forth between channels, but it gives me what I need. And, I work a lot. So, I don't have much time for TV, a couple hours, maybe in the evening, and that's it. No sports to watch anymore. So, right. So even need it less now.
Yeah, I hear you there. All right, well, Kevin, we're running a little close on time, so I wanted to transition into our section that we call the Fast Five, which are just the same 5 questions we ask every guest who comes on our show.
Man, you guys could have tipped me off or something. Now I'm, All right.
No, it's got to all be a surprise. Organic answers.
All right.
All right. So if you had to start all over again and you were in your early 20s, how would you do that?
I would invest in real estate and not go into corporate America. Seriously, I think I missed the boat. I wasn't aware of multifamily real estate. I currently don't have any investments, but I envy anybody that does. And my long-term goal, I'm building these companies right now. But once I get some revenue, I want to throw that revenue into syndication and get involved, because I think it's right on, dead on. Yep.
So how do you see young professionals adding the most value to experienced operators by using your service? Or how do you see, I guess the question we normally ask is, how do you see young professionals adding the most value to experienced operators? But I'm trying to gear it towards you.
Well,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. How do
I know what you mean.
Just add value to anyone?
Man, it's a different perspective. In my world, the more perspectives you have. So I used to work with a guy who used to say, the more smart people you have trying to resolve a difficult challenge, the better the better the solution's going to be. And he instilled that in me a long time ago. And I believe that. Absolutely. I don't believe in anybody having, the right answer. I think some people have a good understanding, but when you talk to other people and get other perspectives, I think it's a huge, huge benefit. And I work on several nonprofits, and we do that. We collaborate all the time. And we specifically, when we're looking for board members, want people with different perspectives, because that's how you represent the best answer and the best part of the community, is with different perspectives that represent, everybody. So I value the insight of people that are looking at it slightly different than I am.
Awesome. So then what's the biggest mistake you've made in your career, and how have you since adjusted your business?
When I started my business, I went, it was kind of a rash decision. I was fed up and decided I'm going to do this. And I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. And I counted too much on one client. And so I wasn't prepared enough and I wasn't diversified enough. And now I have addressed those things and we're in a really, really good spot now because we're very diversified. Multifamily Utility Solutions is one of several companies that is under our umbrella. Happens to be my favorite, but but we've got other opportunities as well, all related to telecommunications and things like that. So we're not deviating from our core business, but we are diversifying.
Awesome.
Very, very good. What's been your favorite way to incorporate technology and social media into your business?
You know what? One of my friends encouraged me. He's like, man, you got to get on podcasts. You got to get on podcasts. He goes, you're not, you got to get out there. Cause I was really doing like a lot on LinkedIn and, things like that. And, man, I didn't realize how many people are like tuning into like you guys and other folks. And, I'll tell you in the last year, it's just gone gangbusters. And, to me, that's been the coolest thing.
Yeah. And then the last question is, what book or books have most influenced you on your journey?
On my journey?
Yeah, just like your business journey or your life journey.
I've gone through a lot of life changes in the last like 4 or 5 years, and it's all been rewarding and learned a lot of lessons. And, the one thing that I used to look at work as work, and now I look at business as a hobby. And that change in perspective, like I've given up golf 4 and 5 years ago because I'd rather spend time at my desk working, but it's not work. It's like figuring stuff out than out there on the golf course for 4 or 5 hours when I'm probably losing money out there, right? Because I'm not as good as I used to be. And now I'm really focused on, I like the challenge of business, man. It's fun. It's exciting. It's invigorating. And I get more out of a business win than I ever got out of a golf win.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool because, I'll sit here at my desk and I work from home. And that's the other thing, technology wise, right? You're all working from home. We're all working remotely. My colleagues are, in different places. If I want to catch up with them, jump on the phone, jump on Zoom, jump on wherever. Right. And, I'll sit here and all of a sudden I'll be like, man, I'm hungry. And be like, oh, no kidding. It's like 7 o'clock at night because, it's fun. I love the challenge and all that kind of stuff. And, it's also caused me to want to be more vigilant in my learning. So like I have become more of a reader in the last 4 or 5 years because I realize I don't know everything and I want to know more. And it's just been kind of cool. And I think those things together have just really given me a great opportunity to learn and grow and help other people. Those are my passions now: learn, grow, help other people, and knowing that business it's not work anymore. It's cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. Especially when you need to learn something to take your business to the next level, and then like you find a book or two or some podcast episodes on it. Like that learning is just so much fun and it's so energizing.
Yeah, it's like when I was in school, right? I was like, I don't want to go to school. Right? But now I'm usually reading 2 or 3 books at one given time, right? Mm-hmm. Just because I want to learn about different things. So I'm like, advancing on each of those things, and it's cool. It's cool. Mm-hmm. It's fun. I sit down at the end of the day and say, you know what? I made a little bit of improvement today, and if I can say that every day that I made a little bit of an improvement, man, that's a good thing.
Yeah. All right, Kevin. Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Millennials and Multifamily Podcast. For anyone who needs to reach out to you for either cable or utility services, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, our website is multifamilyutilitysolutions.com, and it's easy, Kevin at multifamilyutilitysolutions.com. My phone number's on there and everything. And, and I don't mind spending time with people, even if they've only got 20 units right now. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that only have, a handful of units, but they're growing and they're going to be the ones that are calling me in the future. So, happy to talk to people at any time and build that network and help people learn about multifamily and how this might play a role in it.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much. I know I got a ton of value out of this and learned a bunch of new things.
Yeah, great, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here and chat with you guys. It was fun. I can't believe it's almost been an hour already, man. It went quick.
Wise.
Thank you for listening to the Millennials in Multifamily podcast, brought to you by Kronos Investment Partners. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and a written review at iTunes so that we can connect with more people. Finally, head on over to kronosinvestmentpartners.com and sign up for our newsletter so you can stay updated on everything we're doing. If you're interested in partnering with us as we find new opportunities, you can also schedule a phone call with us under the Contact Us tab at kronosinvestmentpartners.com.